The great hall of Thornhaven Castle blazed with 1,000 candles, their light dancing across gilded walls and the faces of wolves who had gathered from every corner of Valdemore. Tonight was the claiming moon, the sacred ceremony where unmated wolves declared their bonds before the Alpha King himself. Elowin stood at the edge of the hall, her fingers trembling against the silver fabric of her ceremonial gown. 3 years she had waited for this night. 3 years of secret glances and whispered promises from Corvin, the Alpha King's younger brother, the wolf who had sworn she was his fated mate. "You look beautiful," Brielle whispered beside her, squeezing her hand. At 15, her younger sister still believed in fairy tales and happy endings. "Corvin won't be able to take his eyes off you." Elowin managed to smile, though her stomach churned with unease. Something felt wrong tonight. Corvin had barely looked at her during the feast, his attention fixed on Lady Vesta, a noble daughter whose family controlled the Eastern Territories. "When he calls your name," Brielle continued excitedly, "you'll walk to the dais and he'll mark you in front of everyone. Then you'll be royalty, Elowen. Our family will finally be safe." Safe. The word echoed through Elowin's mind. Their father had died in the border wars 2 winters past, leaving them with nothing but debts and a crumbling cottage. When Corvin had begun courting her, promising to claim her as his mate, it had seemed like salvation. Not just for her, but for Brielle, who deserved more than a life of poverty and hunger. The ceremonial drums began to pound, silencing the crowd. On the raised dais at the hall's center, the Alpha King sat upon his throne of black stone, his face hidden in shadow. Elowin had never seen him clearly, only heard the rumors, that he was cold as winter iron, that he had killed his own father to take the throne, that no wolf dared meet his gaze. Beside the throne, Corvin stood in ceremonial armor, his handsome face arranged in a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Wolves of Valdemore," the ceremony master announced, "the claiming moon rises. Let those who would declare their bonds step forward." One by one, couples approached the dais. Males declared their chosen mates, females accepted with joy, and the crowd cheered each union. Elowin watched it all with growing dread, waiting for her name, waiting for Corvin to call her forward as he had promised. The ceremonies continued. 10 couples, 20, 30. Corvin never spoke her name. "Perhaps he's saving you for last," Brielle whispered, but her voice had lost its certainty. Finally, when no more couples stepped forward, the ceremony master raised his staff. "The declarations are complete. Does any wolf wish to speak before the claiming moon sets?" Elowin felt the ground shift beneath her feet. Corvin stepped to the edge of the dais, scanning the crowd until his eyes found her. For one breathless moment, hope flared in her chest. Then he smiled, and the cruelty in it shattered everything. "I wish to speak," Corvin announced, his voice carrying easily through the silent hall. "There is a female here tonight who believed she would be claimed, a female who has told everyone in Valdemore that she is my chosen mate." Whispers rippled through the crowd. Elowin felt hundreds of eyes turning toward her, felt the heat of humiliation climbing her neck. "Elowin of the Western Valley," Corvin continued, savoring each word. "Step forward." "Don't!" Brielle grabbed her arm. "Elowin, something's wrong." But Elowin was already moving, drawn by some horrible compulsion toward the dais. The crowd parted before her, their faces a blur of curiosity and barely concealed delight. Everyone loved watching someone else's downfall. She stopped at the base of the steps, looking up at Corvin with desperate confusion. "My lord," she whispered, "I don't understand." "Of course you don't." Corvin's laugh was sharp and mocking. "You actually believed I would mate with a penniless orphan, a female with no bloodline, no power, no worth?" The words struck her like physical blows. "You promised," she breathed. "You said I was your fated—" "I said what I needed to say to warm my bed during the cold months," Corvin interrupted. But mate with you? He turned to the crowd, spreading his arms wide. Look at her. She cannot even afford a proper gown. She had to borrow that dress from a servant. Laughter erupted through the hall, cruel and cascading. Elowen felt tears burning her eyes but refused to let them fall. She would not give them that satisfaction. I reject you, Elowen of the Western Valley, Corvin declared, his voice ringing with ceremony. Before the Alpha King, before all the wolves of Valdemar, I declare you unworthy of my bond. Let no wolf of noble blood ever consider you for claiming. The rejection hit her wolf like a blade through the chest. Elowen gasped, staggering as the pain ripped through her, as something deep inside her howled in agony. The crowd's laughter grew louder, more vicious. Look at her, someone called. She actually thought she could rise above her station. Pathetic, another voice agreed. Someone remove this embarrassment from the hall. Elowen turned to flee, to escape this nightmare, to find somewhere dark and quiet where she could shatter in peace. But before she could take a single step, a voice cut through the chaos like a blade through silk. Enough. The single word was spoken quietly, yet it silenced the entire hall as completely as a thunderclap. The laughter died. The whispers ceased. Every wolf went rigid with instinctive terror. On the throne, the Alpha King had risen to his feet. Elowen's breath caught as he stepped into the candlelight for the first time, and she saw the face that had haunted Valdemar's nightmares for a decade. He was not handsome in the way Corvin was handsome. His features were too sharp, too fierce, carved from shadow and violence. A scar ran from his left temple to his jaw, pale against his sun-darkened skin. His eyes were the color of molten amber, burning with an intensity that made her wolf want to simultaneously flee and submit. This was Kieran, the Wolf King, the Alpha who had united the warring packs through blood and conquest, and he was staring directly at her. Brother, Corvin's voice had lost all its arrogance, replaced by naked fear. You were merely proving yourself unworthy of our bloodline, Kieran interrupted without looking at him. His burning gaze never left Elowen's face as he descended the dais steps with predatory grace. You rejected this female? She is nothing, Corvin stammered, a peasant with delusions of... I did not ask for your assessment. Kieran stopped directly in front of Elowen, so close she could feel the heat radiating from his body, could smell pine and wood smoke, and something wild that made her wolf whimper with recognition. I asked if you rejected her. Yes, but... Good. Kieran's hand rose slowly, and Elowen flinched, expecting a blow. Instead, his fingers touched her chin with impossible gentleness, tilting her face up to meet his intense stare. Then she is unclaimed. The hall had gone deathly silent. What is your name? Kieran asked, his voice low enough that only she could hear. Elowen, she whispered, trembling. Something flickered in those amber depths, something that looked almost like wonder. Elowen? He repeated, as if tasting the word. Then, louder for all the hall to hear. Elowen of the Western Valley, I claim you. The silence shattered into chaos. You cannot, Corvin shouted, his face contorted with fury. She is beneath you. She is beneath all of us. Kieran's gaze finally shifted to his brother, and the temperature in the hall seemed to drop by 10 degrees. Are you challenging my claim? Corvin's mouth opened, then closed. Whatever he saw in his brother's expression made him step backward, nearly stumbling over his own feet. No, he said quickly. Of course not, my king. Then it is done. Kieran's hand slid from Elowen's chin to her wrist, his grip firm but not painful. This female is mine. Any wolf who touches her, threatens her, or speaks against her will, answer to me personally. He began walking toward the hall's great doors, pulling Elowen alongside him. The crowd parted like water before a ship's prow, wolves pressing themselves against the walls to avoid even brushing against their king. Alawen's mind spun with shock and confusion. Minutes ago, she had been publicly destroyed. Now she was being claimed by the most powerful and feared wolf in the kingdom. Wait, she managed as they reached the doors. I don't understand. Why would you? Kieran paused, looking down at her with an expression she couldn't read. You will understand soon enough, he said. But not here. Not with their eyes on us. The doors swung open onto the cold night air, and the Wolf King led his claimed mate into the darkness beyond. Behind them, Elowen heard Brielle calling her name, heard the eruption of shocked whispers that would spread through Valdemar like wildfire. But she couldn't look back. She could only follow this terrifying stranger who had just upended her entire existence. What have I gotten myself into? She thought as the castle swallowed them whole. The king's private chambers were nothing like Elowen had imagined. She had expected cold stone and trophies of war, perhaps the skulls of his enemies mounted on the walls. Instead, she found herself in a room of warm wood and soft firelight, lined with books and scattered with comfortable furniture. Kieran released her wrist the moment the heavy doors closed behind them, moving to stand before the crackling hearth. With his back to her, he seemed almost ordinary, just a tall man warming himself by a fire. But Elowen's wolf knew better. Even now, it prowled restlessly beneath her skin, caught between terror and a strange, inexplicable pull toward this male who had just claimed ownership of her life. You may sit, Kieran said without turning. You look ready to collapse. He wasn't wrong. The rejection's pain still throbbed through her like a wound, and her legs trembled with exhaustion and shock. She lowered herself onto the edge of a velvet chair, perching there like a bird ready to take flight. I don't understand, she said finally, her voice smaller than she intended. You're the Alpha King. You could have any female in the realm. Why would you claim someone like me? Someone like you, he repeated. Tell me, Elowen, what do you think you are? A peasant, she said, echoing Corvin's words. A nobody. An embarrassment. Is that what you believe? Or what my brother told you to believe? The question struck something deep in her chest. Elowen opened her mouth, then closed it again, uncertain how to respond. Kieran crossed the room toward her, each step measured and deliberate. He stopped just out of arm's reach, studying her face with an intensity that made her want to squirm. My brother, he said quietly, is a fool who cannot see beyond bloodlines and politics. He looks at you and sees poverty, sees weakness, sees an easy target for his cruelty. He paused, his jaw tightening. I look at you and see something else entirely. What? Elowen whispered. But Kieran only shook his head, turning away again. It is not yet time for that conversation. Tonight, you need rest. Tomorrow, we will discuss what this claiming means. I need to know now. Elowen surprised herself with the firmness in her voice. I need to know if I just traded one cage for another. Kieran went very still. When he spoke again, his voice was rough with something that might have been pain. I will not force you into anything, he said. The claiming was necessary to protect you from what would have happened otherwise, but I will not touch you without your consent, will not demand anything you are not willing to give. Protect me from what? For a long moment, he didn't answer. Then he walked to a side door and pulled it open, revealing a smaller chamber with a canopied bed and a window overlooking the moonlit forest below. Your room, he said. Mine is through that door. He gestured to another entrance on the far side. It will remain locked from your side. You control when and if it ever opens. Elowen rose slowly, moving toward the offered chamber. As she passed him, close enough to feel the heat of his body, she paused. You didn't answer my question, she said. Protect me from what? Kieran's amber eyes met hers, and for just a moment she saw something ancient and terrible swimming in their depths. From those who have been searching for you, he said, those who will kill anyone with your bloodline. Before she could ask what that meant, he stepped back and closed the door between them, leaving Elowyn alone with 1,000 new questions and the growing certainty that the Alpha King knew far more about her than she knew about herself. She pressed her hand to the door, feeling the solid wood beneath her palm. On the other side, she could hear his footsteps retreating, then silence. What bloodline? She thought. I'm a peasant. My father was a woodcutter, my mother a seamstress. There's nothing special about my blood. But even as she thought it, her wolf stirred with recognition, with a whisper of something that felt like memory. And when Elowyn finally crawled into the unfamiliar bed, her dreams were haunted by visions of fire and ancient forests, and a woman with her face screaming as shadows closed in around her. She woke gasping in the gray dawn light, the taste of smoke still thick on her tongue. 3 days passed in the Alpha King's castle, and Elowyn learned nothing. Kieran was unfailingly polite when they encountered each other, which was rarely. He took his meals separately, conducted his business behind closed doors, and seemed determined to avoid any conversation that might answer her growing list of questions. Meanwhile, Brielle had been given a room in the servants' quarters, comfortable but distant. Elowyn visited her daily, reassuring her sister that everything would be fine while secretly wondering if that was true, and rumors spread through the castle like wildfire. The servants whispered when they thought she couldn't hear, their eyes following her with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. The king has never shown interest in any female, she overheard a maid say. Not once in 10 years. And now he claims a peasant girl at a public ceremony? Something is wrong. Perhaps she bewitched him, another suggested. They say her mother was strange, touched by the old magic. Elowyn's chest tightened. Her mother had died when she was 8, and she remembered almost nothing of her except a soft voice and gentle hands. No one had ever called her mother magical before. On the 4th morning, she decided she had waited long enough. She found Kieran in the castle's great library, standing before a window with a book open in his hands. The morning light caught the sharp planes of his face, softening his scar and revealing unexpected hints of exhaustion beneath his eyes. You've been avoiding me, Elowyn said from the doorway. He didn't startle, didn't even look up from his book. I've been giving you space to adjust. I don't need space. She stepped into the library, closing the door behind her. I need answers. What bloodline were you talking about? Why would anyone want to kill me? And why do the servants keep whispering about my mother? Kieran finally closed the book, setting it aside with careful precision. When his eyes found hers, they held a weariness that surprised her. Your mother, he said quietly, was not what she seemed. Elowyn inhaled sharply. What do you mean? She was a seer, one of the last of an ancient line of wolves who could glimpse the threads of fate. Kieran moved toward her slowly, as if approaching a skittish animal. The gift passes through the female line. It's why your family was hunted, why your mother hid among the peasants, why she likely never told you the truth. That's impossible. Elowyn shook her head. I would know if I had magic. I would feel it. Would you? Kieran stopped an arm's length away. Have you never dreamed of things before they happened? Never sensed danger before it arrived? Never looked at someone and simply known something you shouldn't? The words hit her like stones. Because yes. Yes to all of it. Dreams that came true days later. A crawling sensation on her skin moments before her father's accident. Looking at Corvin last night and knowing, somehow knowing, that something terrible was about to happen. She had always dismissed these things as coincidence, as an overactive imagination. You see it now, Kieran said softly, the recognition in your expression. But if this is true, Elowyn whispered, if my mother was this seer, why didn't she tell me? Why didn't she prepare me? Because the old king, my father, had ordered every seer in the realm executed. Kieran's voice hardened with old fury. He feared their power, feared what they might see about his reign. Your mother escaped the purge by hiding in plain sight, by burying her gift so deep that even she might have forgotten what she was. Elowen's legs went weak. She reached for a nearby chair, lowering herself into it before she fell. My father died when I was 12, she said, in the border wars. But my mother, she died when I was 8. They said it was a fever. It wasn't. Kieran crouched before her, bringing their faces level. This close, she could see flecks of copper in his amber irises, could smell that intoxicating scent of pine and wilderness. She was murdered, Elowen, by wolves who had been hunting seers for decades, and when they realized she had a daughter. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. They've been looking for me, Elowen breathed. All this time. Yes. Kieran's hand rose as if to touch her face, then stopped midair. Why do you think your father took you to the most remote valley in Valdemar? Why do you think he kept you hidden from noble society? He was protecting you the only way he knew how. Tears burned Elowen's eyes. Everything she thought she knew about her life was crumbling like ash. And you? She asked. How do you know all this? Something painful crossed Kieran's face. Because I was there, he said. The night your mother died. I was 16 years old, and my father had ordered me to lead the hunting party. Elowen went cold. What? I didn't know what we were doing. Not truly. I thought we were hunting rogues, dangerous wolves who threatened the kingdom. His voice was rough with remembered horror. By the time I understood the truth, it was too late. Your mother was dying in front of me, and all I could do was watch. Elowen shot to her feet, stumbling backward. You killed her? No. Kieran rose, his hands raised in a placating gesture. I swear to you, I never touched her. But I didn't stop it either. I was young and afraid and under my father's command, and I have carried that guilt every day since. Get away from me. Elowen's voice broke. Don't come near me. Elowen, please, let me explain. Explain what? She was crying now, tears streaming down her cheeks. That you watched my mother die and did nothing? That you've known who I was this entire time? I claimed you to protect you, Kieran said urgently. The wolves who killed your mother, they're still out there. They've been searching for you for years. When I saw you in that hall, when I realized who you were, you should have let me die. The words tore from her throat like a wound. You should have let Corvin destroy me rather than bring me here and tell me this. She ran. Through the library doors, down the winding corridors, past startled servants and guards who called after her. She ran until she burst through a side entrance into the castle gardens, until the cold morning air burned her lungs and she collapsed against an ancient oak, sobbing. Her mother, murdered. Her father, a protector who died keeping her secret. Her entire life, built on lies and hidden truths. And the man who had claimed her, the Alpha King himself, had been there when it all began. Elowen pressed her face to the rough bark, her body shaking with grief. She didn't hear the footsteps approaching, didn't sense the presence behind her until a hand closed over her mouth and a needle pierced her neck. The last thing she saw before darkness claimed her was a face she recognized from the great hall. Lord Malachar, her mind whispered as consciousness fled. He was standing next to Corvin during the rejection. Then there was nothing at all. Elowen woke to the smell of damp stone and old blood. Her head throbbed viciously, and when she tried to move, she discovered her wrists were bound above her, iron shackles biting into her skin. She was in some kind of cellar, lit only by a single torch that cast dancing shadows across walls that glistened with moisture. Ah! A cultured voice said from the darkness. The seer's daughter awakens. A figure stepped into the torchlight, and Elowen's stomach turned. Lord Malachar was tall and gaunt, with the kind of refined features that might have been handsome if not for the cruelty lurking behind his pale eyes. You've caused me considerable trouble, he continued, circling her like a predator examining prey. 20 years I've been searching for you. 20 years of tracking rumors and hunting false leads. And all this time, you were hiding in plain sight in some peasant valley. What do you want? Elowen's voice came out as a croak. What do I want? Malachar laughed softly. I want what I've always wanted. The extinction of the seer bloodline. Your mother was the last adult seer in Valdemar, did you know that? But she managed to hide you before we could complete our work. Why? Elowen pulled against her chains, wincing as the iron cut deeper. What did the seers ever do to you? Malachar's smile faded, replaced by something cold and hateful. Your kind destroyed my family. A seer's prophecy turned the old king against my father, convinced him that House Malachar was plotting treason. We were stripped of our lands, our titles, our honor, all because of one woman's visions. That wasn't my mother. No, Malachar agreed. It was your grandmother. But the sins of the bloodline must be paid in full. He reached into his coat and withdrew a vial of shimmering liquid that seemed to glow with its own inner light. Do you know what this is? Elowen shook her head, fear coiling in her gut. It's called Moon's Bane, an ancient poison designed specifically for our kind. He held the vial up to the torchlight, admiring its contents. A few drops will suppress a wolf's ability to shift. A full dose will kill even the strongest alpha within hours. But for a seer? His smile returned, sharp and vicious. For a seer, it does something far more interesting. He unstoppered the vial and moved toward her. No. Elowen struggled wildly against her chains. Please, don't. This won't kill you, Malachar said, gripping her jaw with bruising force. Not yet. First, it will unlock your gift completely. Force every vision you've ever suppressed to the surface all at once. The pain will be extraordinary. He tilted her head back, positioning the vial above her lips. And when you've seen everything you were meant to see, when your mind has shattered from the onslaught, then I'll let you die. The liquid touched her tongue, cold and bitter, burning as it slid down her throat. Elowen tried to spit it out, but Malachar's hand clamped over her mouth, forcing her to swallow. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the world exploded. Visions slammed into her like waves against a cliff. Her mother's face, young and laughing. Her mother's face, older and terrified, pressing a kiss to 8-year-old Elowen's forehead before pushing her into a hidden cellar. Stay quiet, my love. No matter what you hear, stay quiet. The visions shifted. Her father, standing over her mother's grave, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. I'll protect her, he was saying to no one. I swear on my life, I'll keep her safe. Again, Chiron at 16, his face pale with horror as he watched something terrible unfold. His voice, young and breaking. Father, please. She's just a woman. She's done nothing wrong. Again, a throne room filled with wolves, and on the throne sat not Chiron, but Malachar, his pale eyes gleaming with triumph as bodies littered the floor around him. Again, Elowen herself, standing in a moonlit clearing, but changed somehow. Her hair had gone silver white, and her eyes, when she opened them, blazed with light. And beside her stood a massive black wolf, larger than any she had ever seen, its amber eyes fixed on her with utter devotion. Again, fire, screaming. A child's cry cutting through smoke and chaos. The visions came faster and faster, piling on top of each other until Elowen couldn't tell past from future, memory from prophecy. She was screaming, she realized distantly. Screaming until her throat tore and her voice gave out. Through it all, she heard Malachar laughing. Yes, he breathed. Yes, that's it. See everything. See the end of your pathetic bloodline. But somewhere in the maelstrom of visions, Elowen caught a thread of something different. A heartbeat that wasn't her own, pounding with urgent fury. A voice roaring her name across a great distance. Kirin. He was coming for her. She could feel it through some connection she didn't understand, could sense his wolf tearing through the forest with single-minded determination. And with that knowledge came something else, a surge of power that rose from the depths of her being like a tidal wave. The visions didn't stop, but suddenly Elowen was no longer drowning in them. She was riding them, directing them, wielding them like a weapon. She opened her eyes, and Malachar stumbled backward with a cry of shock. Because her eyes were no longer brown. They blazed with pure light, bright enough to cast shadows across the cellar walls. "What?" Malachar gasped. "That's impossible. The poison should have destroyed you." "You wanted me to see," Elowen heard herself say, her voice layered with harmonics that weren't quite human. "So, I'll show you what I've seen." She reached through the visions, found the thread of Malachar's fate, and pulled. He screamed as his own future flooded into his mind, his schemes unraveled. His allies betrayed him. His death, alone and forgotten in a cell not unlike this one, stripped of everything he had worked to achieve. "No," he whimpered, clutching his head. "No, that's not, it can't be." The cellar door exploded inward. Kieran stood in the opening, still half-shifted, his body caught between man and wolf. His burning gaze found Elowen's across the chaos, and she saw relief so profound it looked like pain. But even as he moved toward her, even as the power continued to surge through her transformed body, Elowen felt something else. Something breaking. The chains weren't just binding her wrists, they were made of iron, the one metal that could wound their kind, and the shackles had cut deep during her struggles. Blood ran freely down her arms, too much blood, and with each passing second, the light in her eyes flickered and dimmed. "Kieran," she whispered as her knees buckled. He caught her before she hit the ground, his arms wrapping around her with fierce tenderness. She could hear him speaking, urgent words in the old tongue that she somehow understood. "Stay with me," he was begging. "Elowen, please, stay with me." But the visions were pulling her down again, deeper this time, into a darkness that felt like drowning. The last thing she saw before consciousness fled was his face above hers, those amber eyes filled with tears. And then there was nothing but the dark. Elowen drifted in a sea of visions. Some were memories, her mother braiding her hair by candlelight, her father teaching her to identify birdsong in the forest, Brielle as a newborn wrapped in threadbare blankets. Others were glimpses of futures that might or might not come to pass. A battlefield soaked in blood beneath a crimson moon, a child with silver hair laughing in a sunlit garden, Curran's face twisted in agony as shadows consumed him. Through it all, she felt a presence beside her. Not in the visions, but in the waking world she couldn't quite reach. Warmth against her hand. A voice speaking words she couldn't understand but somehow recognized. "Stay," the voice kept saying. "Stay with me." So she did. Elowen woke slowly, awareness returning in fragments. Soft sheets beneath her. Firelight dancing across a ceiling she didn't recognize. And weight, warm and solid, pressed against her palm. She turned her head and found Kieran slumped in a chair beside her bed, his hand wrapped around hers, his head bowed in exhausted sleep. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and stubble covered his jaw as if he hadn't moved from this spot in days. Days. How long had she been unconscious? As if sensing her attention, Kieran stirred. His eyes opened, unfocused at first, then sharpening with sudden alertness when they found her face. Elowen. Her name left his lips like a prayer. He straightened, his grip on her hand tightening. "You're awake. Thank the gods. You're awake." "How long?" Her voice emerged as a croak, her throat raw and aching. "5 days." He reached for a cup of water on the bedside table, helping her drink with a tenderness that seemed at odds with everything she knew about the fearsome Wolf King. The healers weren't sure you would survive. The moon's bane, combined with your awakening and the blood loss from the iron chains. He trailed off, his jaw clenching. Malachar, Elowen said, memories flooding back. The cellar, the poison, the visions that had nearly torn her mind apart. What happened to him? Something dark crossed Kieran's face. He escaped during the chaos, but he won't get far. I have every wolf in Valdemar hunting him. Elowen closed her eyes, processing this. The man who had murdered her mother, who had poisoned her and tried to destroy her mind, was still out there, still a threat. Brielle, she said suddenly, panic rising, where is my sister? Is she safe? She's safe, Kieran assured her quickly. I assigned my most trusted guards to protect her the moment you disappeared. She's been visiting you every day, worried sick, but unharmed. Relief washed through her, loosening the knot in her chest. The visions, she whispered after a moment. I saw things, terrible things. You don't have to speak of them now. I saw you. She opened her eyes, meeting his gaze. When you were young, the night my mother died, you tried to stop it. Kieran went very still. I heard you begging your father to spare her, Elowen continued. I felt your horror when he refused. You weren't a monster that night, Kieran. You were a boy trapped in an impossible situation. A muscle twitched in his jaw, and she saw moisture gathering in his eyes. That doesn't absolve me. No, she agreed quietly, but it changes things. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The fire crackled in the hearth, and somewhere beyond the windows, Elowen could hear the distant howl of wolves on patrol. I also saw other things, she said finally. Futures that haven't happened yet. A battlefield beneath a red moon. A child with silver hair. She hesitated. And you. Dying in darkness while I screamed your name. Kieran's hand tightened around hers almost painfully. Visions aren't certainties, he said roughly. Your mother told me that once. Before. He stopped, swallowing hard. The future can be changed. You spoke to my mother? Once. His thumb traced absent circles on her palm, a gesture that seemed unconscious. I was 14, and my father had brought me to witness an interrogation. Your mother was the prisoner. His voice grew distant with memory. She looked at me and said, You will love my daughter, young prince, and that love will either save the kingdom or destroy it. Elowen's pulse quickened. She knew. Even then, she knew about us. She knew many things. Kieran lifted her hand, pressing his lips to her knuckles in a gesture that echoed the night he had claimed her. I didn't understand her words at the time. I was a child, and the idea of loving anyone seemed impossible in my father's brutal court, but I never forgot them. Is that why you claimed me? Because of a prophecy? No. His intent amber eyes burned into hers. I claimed you because when I saw you in that hall, standing alone against my brother's cruelty, refusing to break even as everyone laughed, something in me recognized something in you. My wolf knew before my mind did. Knew what? Kieran leaned closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth of his breath. That you were mine, he said simply. That you had always been mine, and I had spent my entire life waiting without knowing what I was waiting for. Elowen's skin flushed with heat. The pull she had felt toward him since that first night, the inexplicable connection that had drawn her to consciousness when the visions tried to drown her, it suddenly made terrifying sense. The bond, she whispered. The claiming. It's more than political, isn't it? For most wolves, claiming is a choice, a declaration of intent. Kieran's voice dropped lower. But for true mates, wolves whose souls were matched before birth, the claim awakens something deeper. A bond that transcends distance and time. I felt you dying in that cellar, Elowen. Felt your pain as if it were my own. That's how I found you. True mates. The words rang through her like a bell. What does that mean for us? She asked. Before Kieran could answer, the chamber door burst open. Brielle rushed in, her young face streaked with tears, followed by a harried-looking servant who was clearly supposed to have prevented this interruption. Elowyn! Brielle threw herself onto the bed, wrapping her arms around her sister. They said you might die. They said the poison was too strong. I've been so scared. Elowyn held her sister tightly, breathing in the familiar scent of home. I'm here, she murmured. I'm not going anywhere. Over Brielle's shoulder, she met Kieran's eyes. He had risen from his chair, his expression shifting from tender to guarded as others entered the room. We will continue this conversation later, he said quietly. Elowyn nodded, but as she watched him retreat toward the door, a chill ran down her spine that had nothing to do with her recent ordeal. The vision she hadn't told him about, the one that had burned brightest of all. Kieran standing before a great fire, his hands covered in blood, while a voice whispered, "The king must die for the kingdom to live." Whose blood? She wondered as the door closed behind him. And whose voice was that? The questions haunted her long after Brielle had cried herself to sleep in her arms. 2 weeks passed, and Elowyn grew stronger each day. Her seer abilities, once dormant, now simmered constantly beneath the surface. Visions came without warning, flashes of possibility that interrupted her waking hours and invaded her dreams. The castle healers taught her basic techniques for managing the gift, but controlling it fully would take years of practice she didn't have. Meanwhile, her relationship with Kieran had shifted into something she couldn't define. They took meals together now, just the two of them in his private chambers. He told her stories of the kingdom, of the politics and alliances that kept Valdemar stable. She shared memories of her childhood in the valley, of the father who had sacrificed everything to keep her hidden. Slowly, carefully, they were learning each other. But always, there was a boundary neither of them crossed. Kieran never touched her beyond what courtesy required, never pressed for more than she offered. And Elowyn, still reeling from everything she had learned, was grateful for the space. Until the night everything changed. She was walking through the castle gardens, enjoying the cool evening air, when she heard voices drifting from an open window above. "Saul, can't delay much longer." The speaker was Corvin, his tone sharp with impatience. "Every day she remains alive is another day your position weakens." "My position is secure." Kieran's voice, cold and controlled. The claiming was witnessed by every noble house in Valdemar. A claiming that half the kingdom believes was bewitchment. Corvin laughed bitterly. "They whisper that the seer's daughter has ensorcelled you, brother, that she's manipulating you with her unnatural gifts." "Let them whisper. Easy for you to say. You're not the one fielding demands from the noble houses, the one watching alliances crumble because our king chose a peasant witch over a proper political match." Corvin's voice rose. "Father would be ashamed." A heavy silence followed. When Kieran spoke again, his voice was deadly quiet. "Our father was a butcher who slaughtered innocents to feed his paranoia. If his ghost is ashamed of me, I consider it a compliment." "Careful, brother. Sentiment like that could be considered treason." "Is that a threat?" "It's a warning." Corvin's tone shifted, becoming almost gentle. "I don't want to be your enemy, Kieran. We're blood. But you have duties to this kingdom that transcend personal attachments. The Council of Lords meets tomorrow morning. They will demand that you either complete the mating bond or renounce your claim on the seer's daughter entirely." Elowyn's chest constricted. Complete the mating bond. She knew what that meant. The joining of two wolves in body and soul, a connection that could never be broken. And renounce your claim meant casting her out, leaving her vulnerable to everyone who wanted her dead. "And if I do neither?" Kieran asked. "Then the council will call for a vote of no confidence. They'll strip your title and install me as Alpha King in your place." Corvin paused. "I don't want that, brother. But I will do what's necessary to protect this kingdom from your obsession with a woman you barely know. Footsteps approached the window, and Elowen pressed herself against the wall, her heart hammering. She heard Kieran's voice, closer now. You speak of protecting the kingdom, but we both know this is about your wounded pride. You rejected her publicly, and I claimed her before the entire realm. You can't stand that I wanted what you threw away. Believe what you wish. Corvin's voice dripped with venom. Tomorrow morning, brother, choose wisely. A door slammed somewhere above, and then silence. Elowen stood frozen in the darkness, her mind racing. Tomorrow morning. She had mere hours before Kieran was forced to either bind himself to her forever or abandon her to his enemies. Neither option seemed fair to him. She was still standing there, paralyzed by indecision, when a hand closed over her mouth from behind. Don't scream, a familiar voice whispered. I'm trying to save your life. The hand released her, and Elowen spun to find herself face to face with an old woman she had never seen before. But something about those sharp eyes, that knowing smile, tugged at her memory. Who are you? Someone who knew your mother. The old woman glanced nervously toward the castle windows. And someone who knows what Lord Malachar is planning. We need to talk, child, but not here. Follow me. Every instinct screamed that this was a trap. But the mention of her mother, combined with the genuine fear in the old woman's eyes, made Elowen hesitate. Why should I trust you? The old woman reached into her cloak and withdrew a pendant on a silver chain. Even in the dim light, Elowen recognized it. A crescent moon cradling a star. Her mother had worn an identical pendant in every memory Elowen possessed. Because your mother was my daughter, the old woman said quietly, and I am the grandmother you were told was dead. Now please, Elowen, we don't have much time. Elowen stared at the pendant, at the face that now showed traces of her mother's features beneath the wrinkles and years. It was impossible. Her grandmother had died before she was born. That's what her father had always said. But her father had said many things that turned out to be lies. Against every rational thought, Elowen followed the old woman into the darkness beyond the garden walls. They walked for nearly an hour through the forest surrounding the castle, following paths that seemed to appear only when the old woman stepped onto them. Finally, they reached a small clearing where a cottage stood, ancient and overgrown with ivy. Inside, the old woman said, quickly. The cottage interior was cluttered with herbs and books, and strange artifacts that hummed with residual power. Elowen recognized some of the items from her visions, tools of a seer's trade. Sit, the old woman commanded, gesturing to a chair by the hearth. And listen carefully, because I will only say this once. Elowen sat. My name is Thessaly, and I was the last Grand Seer of Valdemar before the Purge. The old woman settled into a chair across from her, her joints creaking with age. When the old king began his slaughter, I went into hiding. I faked my death, abandoned my daughter to protect her, and have lived in these woods ever since. You abandoned my mother? Elowen felt a spark of anger. You let her face the hunters alone? I let her live. Thessaly's voice was sharp. If I had stayed, they would have found us both. By disappearing, I drew their attention away from her. It worked for nearly 2 decades. Her expression darkened. Until Malachar found her anyway. Elowen's anger faded, replaced by grief. You've been watching this whole time. Watching her die. Watching me grow up without knowing any of this. Watching and waiting, Thessaly agreed. Because I saw this moment. Elowen, I saw you coming into your power. And I saw what Malachar plans to do with the information he extracted from your awakening. What do you mean? Thessaly leaned forward, her old eyes burning with intensity. The Moonsbane didn't just unlock your visions, it allowed Malachar to glimpse them too. He knows things now that no enemy of the crown should ever know. Battle plans, secret alliances, and most dangerous of all, She paused, her voice dropping to barely a whisper. He knows the truth about the Alpha King's bloodline. Elowen felt ice spread through her veins. What truth? That Kieran is not his father's son. Thessaly held up a hand to forestall Elowen's shocked questions. The old king was sterile from a wound taken in his youth, a secret known only to his inner circle and the seers who kept his confidence. The queen took a lover to produce an heir, a common practice among noble houses facing extinction. But if this truth were revealed now, it would mean Kieran has no legitimate claim to the throne. And Corvin would become king, Elowen breathed, understanding flooding through her. Worse than that. Thessaly's face was grim. Corvin is already working with Malachar. Has been for years. Why do you think he rejected you so publicly? It wasn't cruelty for cruelty's sake. It was bait. They knew Kieran would claim you. They wanted him to bind himself to a seer, because seers can be used as weapons, Elowen. Our visions can be extracted, twisted, turned against those we love. The room seemed to spin around her. The moon's bane, Elowen said slowly, pieces falling into place. Malachar didn't just want to kill me. He wanted to harvest my visions, learn the kingdom's secrets. And now he has them. Thessaly rose from her chair, moving to a cabinet filled with vials and powders. Tomorrow morning, Corvin will present evidence of Kieran's illegitimacy to the council. Malachar will use your stolen visions to reveal every secret the crown has tried to protect. And when the dust settles, Corvin will sit on the throne with Malachar as his right hand. Then I have to warn Kieran. Warning him won't be enough. Thessaly turned, and in her hands was a small box carved from black wood. There's only one way to protect him now. The same way your mother tried to protect you. She opened the box, revealing a dagger with a blade that shimmered like moonlight. This is the seer's blade, Thessaly said quietly. Forged in the first age for moments exactly like this. It can sever the connection Malachar created when he poisoned you. Destroy the link through which he accesses your visions. Then we should use it immediately. It's not that simple. Thessaly's eyes met hers with terrible weight. The blade doesn't sever the connection cleanly. It severs everything. Your gift, your bond with the Alpha King, possibly your life itself. There's no way to know what you'll lose until you make the cut. Elowen stared at the blade, her stomach sinking. Everything. She might lose everything. There has to be another way. There isn't. Thessaly pressed the box into her hands. Believe me, child. I've seen every path forward. They all end in blood and fire except for one, and that one requires you to make an impossible choice. Outside, a wolf howled in the distance, then another, and another. Thessaly's face went pale. They're hunting you. Malachar's wolves. They must have followed your scent from the castle. Then I'll lead them away. No. Thessaly gripped her arm with surprising strength. Take the blade, go north, toward the old ruins. There's a place there where even Malachar's wolves won't follow. Decide what you're willing to sacrifice. And when you're ready. She pressed something else into Elowen's hand, the pendant with the crescent moon. Find your king. Tell him the truth, and pray to the old gods that love is stronger than blood. Before Elowen could respond, Thessaly shoved her toward the cottage's back door. Run! The old woman commanded. Run, and don't look back. Elowen ran. Behind her, she heard the cottage door splinter. Heard her grandmother's voice raised in defiance. Heard snarling and screaming and then terrible silence. She ran until her lungs burned and her legs threatened to give out. She ran until the trees thinned and ancient stone ruins rose before her in the moonlight, just as Thessaly had promised. And there, finally, she collapsed against a weathered pillar and wept for the grandmother she had found and lost in the same night. The seer's blade gleamed in her hands, cold and patient, waiting for her choice. Dawn found Elowen still among the ruins, the blade clutched to her chest like a lifeline. She hadn't slept. Every time she closed her eyes, visions assaulted her. fragments of possible futures, each more terrible than the last. She saw Kieran in chains, saw Valdemar burning, saw Brielle's face twisted in terror as shadows closed around her. And threading through all of it, Malakar's presence, watching through her eyes, learning through her visions, using her gift as a weapon against everyone she loved. I have to sever the connection, she thought. But at what cost? The bond with Kieran. She could feel it now, a golden thread connecting her heart to his across the miles between them. It had grown stronger since her awakening, pulsing with his emotions. Worry, fear, frantic searching. He was looking for her. Had probably been looking all night. If she used the blade, that thread might snap forever. She might never feel him again. Never know the full depth of what they could have been. But if she didn't use it, Malakar would continue exploiting her visions until he had destroyed everything. There has to be another way, she whispered to the empty ruins. The ruins didn't answer. Hours passed. The sun climbed higher, then began its descent. Elowyn knew she couldn't hide forever. Soon, Malakar's wolves would find this place too, or Kieran's searchers would stumble across her trail. She had to decide. As twilight painted the sky in shades of purple and gold, a vision struck without warning. She saw the great hall of Thornhaven Castle, tomorrow at dawn. Corvin stood before the assembled council, documents in his hand, his voice ringing with triumph as he revealed Kieran's illegitimacy. She saw the nobles' shock, their outrage, their calls for Kieran's immediate removal. And she saw Kieran's face as his world crumbled around him. But then the vision shifted, showing her something else. Another possibility, branching off from the first. In this version, she stood beside Kieran, the seer's blade in her hand. She drove it into her own heart just as Corvin began to speak. The moment the blade pierced her flesh, a wave of power exploded outward. Every vision Malakar had stolen, every secret he had learned, was erased from existence. And in the chaos that followed, Kieran revealed something that changed everything. Evidence that Corvin himself had been working with the enemies of the crown, that he had orchestrated the entire plot to steal the throne. In this vision, Kieran won. The kingdom survived. But Elowyn lay dead on the great hall floor, her blood pooling around the seer's blade. She gasped as the vision released her, tears streaming down her face. There it was, the path forward. The sacrifice required. Her life for his kingdom, her blood for his throne. No, a voice growled from the shadows. Elowyn spun, the blade raised defensively, but it was Kieran who emerged from the dying light. His clothes were torn, his face haggard with exhaustion, but his amber eyes blazed with an intensity that stole her breath. "I won't let you do it," he said, stalking toward her. "You saw?" Elowyn's voice trembled. "How did you—" "I felt it." He stopped inches from her, close enough that she could see the pulse hammering in his throat. "Through the bond, I felt your vision, felt you accepting death as though it were inevitable." His hands came up to cup her face, his touch almost painful in its urgency. "I won't allow it, Elowyn. I won't lose you. You don't understand." She tried to pull away, but his grip held firm. "Malakar has access to my visions. Every secret I see, he learns. The only way to stop him is not that way." Kieran's forehead pressed against hers, his breath ragged. "There has to be another way." "There isn't. My grandmother saw every path. They all end in blood and fire except— Whoever told you there's only one path was wrong." The certainty in his voice made her pause. "The seers see possibilities," Kieran continued, "not certainties. You told me that yourself. The future can be changed." His hand slid from her face to her shoulders, gripping hard. "I've spent my entire life fighting against the fate others predicted for me. My father's seers said I would be a weak king, that I would destroy the kingdom. Instead, I united it. Prophecy is not destiny, Eloan, but the visions show what might happen, not what must. His burning gaze bored into hers. I found another way. A path your grandmother couldn't see because she didn't know about it. Hope flickered in Eloan's chest, fragile and uncertain. What path? The mating bond. Kieran's voice dropped lower. Not the partial claim I made in the Great Hall, but the full bond. The joining of souls that creates something new from two separate beings. Eloan's heart raced. I don't understand. When true mates complete their bond, their abilities merge. Your seer's gift would become partly mine, and my wolf's strength would become partly yours. His grip on her shoulders tightened. Malakar's connection to you was created through poison and force, but a true bond, freely given, is stronger than any dark magic. It would burn away his corruption like fire through rot. You can't know that for certain. No, he admitted, but I believe it, and I'm willing to stake everything on that belief. His hand rose to trace the line of her jaw, achingly gentle. The question is whether you're willing to do the same. Eloan stared at him, her mind racing through the implications. The full mating bond was permanent, unbreakable. It meant tying herself to this man forever, sharing not just her life, but her very soul. Why? She whispered. Why would you risk your kingdom, your throne, everything you've built for a woman you've known for mere weeks? Kieran's smile was small and sad and beautiful. Because your mother was right, he said. I do love you, Eloan. I think I've loved you since before I knew your name, since a dying seer looked at a frightened boy and told him his future held something worth surviving for. His thumb brushed across her cheek, catching a tear she hadn't realized she'd shed. You are worth more to me than any throne. If I have to choose between my kingdom and your life, the choice isn't even difficult. The words cracked something open in her chest. The council meets at dawn, she said, her voice unsteady. If we do this, if we complete the bond, they'll say I bewitched you. They'll use it as more proof that I'm dangerous. Let them. Kieran's expression sharpened with determination. I've spent 10 years proving myself to wolves who will never be satisfied. I'm done seeking their approval. I want you, Eloan. Not because prophecy demands it, not because politics requires it, but because when I look at you, my wolf goes quiet for the first time in my life. Because when you were dying in my arms, I knew I would follow you into death rather than live without you. Eloan's breath faltered. The seer's blade slipped from her nerveless fingers, clattering against the ancient stones. Before she could think, before she could second guess, she closed the distance between them. The kiss was not gentle. It was hungry and raw with all the fear and hope and longing that had built between them since that first night in the Great Hall. Chiron's arms wrapped around her like iron bands, pulling her against him as if he could physically prevent fate from tearing her away. When they finally broke apart, both gasping for breath, the golden thread between them pulsed with new intensity. Is that a yes? Kieran asked, his voice rough. Yes, Eloan breathed. Gods help us both. Yes. Something shifted in the air around them, ancient magic responding to their declaration. But before they could act on it, before the bond could be completed, the ruins exploded with movement. Wolves poured from the shadows, dozens of them, their eyes gleaming with unnatural light. And at their head, walking calmly through the chaos, was Lord Malakar. How touching, he said, his cultured voice dripping with mockery. The star-crossed lovers, ready to sacrifice everything for each other. He smiled, and in the dying light, his teeth seemed too sharp, too numerous. Unfortunately, I can't allow this particular fairy tale to have a happy ending. Kieran shoved Eloan behind him, a snarl building in his chest. How did you find us? Your little seer isn't the only one with gifts. Malakar tapped his temple. The Moonsbane created a link between us. I see what she sees, feel what she feels. Every tender moment, every reckless plan. His smile widened. I knew you would come to her eventually. I've just been waiting for the right moment to strike. The wolves around them began to close in, tightening the circle. Run! Kieran growled, not taking his eyes off Malachar. Find my wolves. Bring help. I'm not leaving you. How noble! Malachar's laugh was sharp and cruel. But unnecessary. Neither of you will be leaving these ruins alive. He raised his hand, and the wolves attacked. Chaos erupted in the ruins. Kieran shifted mid-leap, his body exploding into the massive black wolf Eloan had glimpsed in her visions. He met the first wave of attackers with savage fury, his jaws closing around throats and his claws tearing through flesh. But there were too many of them. Far too many. And even the Alpha King couldn't fight an army alone. Eloan scrambled for the seer's blade, her fingers closing around its hilt just as a wolf lunged for her throat. She slashed wildly, feeling the blade bite into fur and muscle, and the creature fell back with a howl of pain. More came. Always more. Through the chaos, she could see Kieran fighting his way toward her, his black fur matted with blood, some his, some theirs. But Malachar's wolves kept pushing between them, a living wall of teeth and claws. Give up, little seer, Malachar called from his position at the edge of the battle. He hadn't shifted, hadn't even moved, content to watch his minions do the bloody work. Your king is strong, but he's only one wolf. Accept the inevitable. Eloan's grip tightened on the blade. The visions swirled through her mind. Death and fire and blood. But beneath them, she sensed something else. A thread of possibility she hadn't seen before. Golden and bright, pulsing in time with her heartbeat. The bond. Even incomplete, even fragile, the connection to Chiron hummed with untapped power. What had he said? When true mates complete their bond, their abilities merge. They hadn't completed the bond, but they had begun it. That kiss in the ruins, that mutual declaration of love, it had started something, created a bridge between their souls that hadn't existed before. Could she use it? Eloan closed her eyes, reaching inward toward that golden thread. She could feel Chiron through it, his fury and fear and unwavering determination. She could feel the wild strength of his wolf, ancient and primal. And she could feel him reaching back. Take what you need, his voice echoed through her mind. Not words exactly, but meaning, pure and clear. I'm yours. Power flooded through her, not the gentle warmth of her seer's gift, but something fiercer, the raw strength of an alpha wolf, tempered by centuries of bloodline and battle. It merged with her own abilities, and suddenly she could see clearly for the first time. Not fragments and possibilities, but the true shape of what was happening around her. Malachar's wolves weren't just following orders. They were bound to him through dark magic, their wills suppressed, their bodies puppeted by his power. The corruption ran through them like poison, originating from Malachar himself, and spreading outward through invisible chains, chains that could be cut. Eloan's eyes snapped open, blazing with light, not just with her seer's power, but with the wolf strength Kieran had shared. She raised the blade and drove it into the ground at her feet. The effect was immediate and devastating. Power exploded outward from the point of impact, racing through the ruins like lightning through water. Where it touched Malachar's wolves, the dark chains binding them shattered. Wolves collapsed mid-attack, whimpering and confused as their minds returned to their own control. But the power didn't stop there. It raced toward Malachar himself, and Eloan saw real fear flash across his face for the first time. He raised his hands, summoning shields of dark energy, but the golden light tore through them like paper. Impossible, he gasped, stumbling backward. You haven't completed the bond. You shouldn't have this power. Love doesn't need completion to be real, Elowen said, and her voice resonated with harmonics that shook the ancient stones. It only needs to be true. The light struck Malachar full in the chest. He screamed, a sound of pure agony that echoed through the ruins and beyond, carrying across the miles to Thornhaven Castle itself. The corruption that had allowed him to access Elowen's visions, to control his wolves, to scheme and plot in shadows for decades, all of it burned away in an instant. When the light faded, Malachar lay crumpled on the ground, still alive, but utterly broken. The predator who had haunted her family for generations had been reduced to a whimpering shell. Around them, the freed wolves were slowly rising, shaking their heads in confusion. Some shifted back to human form, staring at their hands as if seeing them for the first time. "What did you do to us?" one of them asked, his voice cracking. "I set you free," Elowen said simply. Strong arms wrapped around her from behind, and she sagged into Kieran's embrace as the borrowed power finally drained away. He had shifted back to human form, bloodied but alive. Gloriously alive. "You magnificent, terrifying woman," he breathed against her hair. "You could have died, using that much power without a complete bond." "But I didn't." She turned in his arms, reaching up to touch his face. "Because you gave me your strength. Because we're connected, Kieran. Even without the ritual. Even without the ceremony." His burning gaze searched hers. "We should complete it," he said quietly. "Here. Now. Before anything else can tear us apart." "Here?" Elowen glanced at the devastation around them. The groaning wolves, the unconscious Malachar, the blood-soaked stones. "In the middle of all this? I don't want to wait another moment." Kieran's fingers threaded through her hair, tilting her face up to his. "I've waited my whole life without knowing I was waiting. I refuse to wait any longer." Elowen's chest swelled with emotion. After everything they had survived, after all the secrets and betrayals and near deaths, here was this man, this king, looking at her like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. "Yes," she whispered. "Complete the bond. Make me yours." The ritual was simpler than she had imagined. Kieran's teeth found the sensitive spot where her neck met her shoulder, the same place where claiming bites had been given since the first wolves walked the earth. The pain was sharp but brief, quickly overtaken by a flood of warmth that spread through her entire body. She felt him then, truly felt him. Not just emotions through a fragile thread, but his entire being opening to her. His memories became hers. A childhood of brutality under his father's reign, the moment he first saw her mother and heard the prophecy that would shape his life. Years of ruling alone, while secretly hoping for something he couldn't name. And she gave herself back to him just as completely. Her grief for parents lost too soon. Her fierce love for Brielle. Her terror and wonder at the gifts she had never asked for. Every secret, every fear, every hope she had ever harbored flowed through the bond between them. When it was done, when the bite had healed into a silver scar that marked her as his forever, Elowen felt tears streaming down her face. "I can feel you," she breathed. "Everything you are. It's beautiful, Kieran. You're beautiful." He kissed her then, soft and reverent, a promise sealed with more than words. "We need to get back to the castle," he said when they finally parted. "The council meets at dawn, and Corvin—" "Corvin?" Elowen's expression hardened as she remembered everything her grandmother had revealed. "He's been working with Malachar. He knows about your bloodline." Kieran's face went carefully blank. "You know." "Thessaly told me, my grandmother." Elowen swallowed hard. "She's dead now. Malachar's wolves killed her while I escaped." Pain crossed Kieran's features. "I'm sorry. If I had known she was alive. There's no time for grief yet." Elowen straightened her shoulders, drawing on the strength their bond provided. Corvin plans to expose your illegitimacy at dawn. He'll use it to claim the throne. Let him try. Kieran's voice was steel. I have evidence of my own, evidence of his conspiracy with Malachar. When the council sees the truth, Corvin will be the one in chains. Kieran retrieved the seer's blade from where it stood embedded in the cracked stones, pressing it back into Eloin's palm. Keep this, he said. It's yours now. They gathered what allies they could from the freed wolves, those who were grateful for their liberation and eager to testify against their former master. Kieran's own wolves had searched Malachar's unconscious body during the chaos, finding the journal that would seal Corvin's fate. Then they rode through the night toward Thornhaven Castle, arriving just as the first pale light of dawn broke over the spires. The great hall was already filling when they entered. Eloin spotted Brielle near the back of the hall, flanked by two of Kieran's guards. Her sister's face flooded with relief when their eyes met, and Eloin gave her a small nod of reassurance. Every noble house in Valdemar had sent representatives, drawn by the promise of drama and political upheaval. Corvin stood at the front of the hall, documents clutched in his hands, his face arranged in an expression of righteous concern. "Brother," he said as Kieran approached, "I was worried. You disappeared for days without word. Some feared the worst." "I'm sure you did." Kieran's voice carried easily through the hall. "Tell me, Corvin, what exactly were you planning to announce today?" Corvin's smile faltered slightly. "I don't know what you mean." "Then allow me to explain." Kieran turned to address the assembled nobles. "My brother intended to reveal that I am not our father's biological son. He hoped to use this information to have me removed from the throne." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Corvin's face went pale. "You admit it?" someone called. "I admit nothing that wasn't already known." Kieran's gaze swept the hall. "My mother took a lover to produce an heir because our father was incapable of siring children. This was done with his knowledge and approval, as was common practice among noble houses facing extinction. I have documents proving this, signed by our father himself." He produced a scroll, handing it to the nearest council member. "Furthermore," Kieran continued, "I have evidence that Corvin has been conspiring with Lord Malachar, a man who orchestrated the murder of innocent seers, who poisoned my claimed mate, and who enslaved dozens of wolves through dark magic to serve his schemes." The freed wolves stepped forward, their testimonies tumbling out in a flood of accusations. They spoke of years of enslavement, of being forced to guard Corvin's secret meetings with Malachar, of overhearing their plans to overthrow the crown. Corvin's composure crumbled. "This is lies," he sputtered. "Fabrications designed to—" "Is this a fabrication?" Eloin stepped forward, and the hall fell silent. She was still wearing the torn dress from the ruins, still marked with blood and dirt, but she walked with the bearing of a queen. In her hands she carried Malachar's journal, filled with meticulous records of every plot, every payment, every promise Corvin had made. "Lord Malachar kept excellent records," she said, her voice carrying clearly, "including the arrangement to have me poisoned with moonsbane so he could harvest my visions." She opened the journal to a specific page. "And the payments Corvin made to ensure the poison was administered at the most opportune moment." Corvin lunged for the journal, but two guards seized him before he could take a step. "This is treason," the head of the council declared, his voice shaking with fury. "Conspiracy against the crown, collusion with enemies of the realm." "I am the rightful king!" Corvin screamed, thrashing against the guards. "My blood is pure. His is tainted. The throne should be mine." Kieran approached his brother slowly, his expression unreadable. "Our father was a monster," he said quietly, for Corvin's ears alone. "A butcher who slaughtered innocents and ruled through fear. I've spent 10 years trying to undo his damage, trying to build something better from the ashes he left behind." He paused, something almost like pity crossing his face. "You could have been part of that, brother. Instead, You chose to become exactly what he was. He turned away, leaving Corvin to be dragged from the hall by the guards. The council's judgment was swift. Corvin was stripped of all titles and sentenced to exile beyond the borders of Valdemar, forbidden to return on pain of death. Malachar, still unconscious, would face trial when he recovered, if he recovered, for crimes spanning decades. And Alawen, the peasant girl who had been publicly rejected and humiliated in this very hall, found herself standing beside the Alpha King as his recognized mate. "You should say something," Kieran murmured, his hand finding hers. "They need to see you as their queen." Alawen looked out at the sea of faces, nobles who had laughed at her rejection, servants who had whispered about her strangeness, wolves who had doubted her worth. 2 weeks ago, their scorn would have broken her. Now, with Kieran's strength flowing through their bond, with her grandmother's pendant hanging over her heart, with powers she was only beginning to understand humming beneath her skin, she felt no fear at all. "I know what many of you think of me," she said, her voice steady and clear. "A peasant, a witch, an embarrassment who should never have risen above her station." She paused, letting the words sink in. "But I am none of those things. I am the granddaughter of the Grand Seer Thessaly, daughter of a seer who died protecting me, mate of a king who sees value where others see only weakness." She lifted her chin, meeting the eyes of every wolf who had mocked her. "I will not apologize for who I am or how I came to be here. I will not beg for your approval or cower before your judgment. I am Elowyn, Queen of Valdemar, and I will spend my reign proving that strength comes in many forms, and that the wolves who overlooked me made the greatest mistake of their lives." The silence stretched. Then, slowly, a single noble dropped to one knee, then another, and another, until the entire hall was bowing before her, a wave of submission and respect from the same wolves who had jeered at her destruction. Kieran's hand tightened around hers, pride radiating through their bond. "Well spoken, my queen," he murmured. In the crowd, Brielle was beaming through tears of joy, and Elowyn felt her heart swell knowing her sister would finally have the safe, abundant life she deserved. She had come to Thornhaven Castle expecting to be claimed by Corvin, hoping for nothing more than safety for herself and her sister. Instead, she had found her birthright, her powers, her purpose, and a love that transcended prophecy and politics alike. As the assembled wolves rose from their knees and the great hall erupted in cheers, Elowyn looked up at the man who had chosen her when no one else would. "What happens now?" she asked. Kieran's eyes gleamed with promise. "Now," he said, pulling her close, "we build the kingdom my father tried to destroy. Together." And when he kissed her, there, in front of every noble house in Valdemar, Elowyn knew with absolute certainty that this was only the beginning. The seer's daughter had become a queen, and the wolves who had laughed at her rejection would never underestimate her again. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed the story. A big thank you to everyone who subscribed. Your support truly means the world to me.